Have you ever wondered what the secret ingredient is that connects a happy, secure child, a groundbreaking scientific study, and a brand you'd recommend to literally anyone? Well, it's a principle that's so powerful, but honestly, it's often totally overlooked, and that's the consistency principle. So today, we're going to dive deep and unlock how this one idea is the bedrock of trust in pretty much every part of our lives. It's a great question, right? I mean, on the surface, they seem like they're from completely different worlds. But there's a common thread that ties them all together, and that is their deep reliance on consistency. So let's explore how this single principle really is the key to creating security, validity, and loyalty. Okay, so to really get a handle on the power of consistency, we have to start at the very beginning. We're talking about our innate human need for a world that makes sense, a world that's predictable. This craving is basically wired into us from the moment we're born. Think about it. When we're kids, our brains are just desperately trying to map out the world around us. And as child development experts always point out, consistent parenting provides that map. Predictable rules and reliable emotional responses, that's what creates a real sense of security. And look, this isn't about being super rigid or strict, but it is about building a reliable world where a child feels safe enough to learn and grow. This quote just nails it. Stability and predictability. They aren't just nice to haves. They are absolutely essential for a child's psychological development. I mean, an inconsistent world creates anxiety, but a consistent one, that's how you build trust from the ground up. And this is where things get really, really interesting. This need for a predictable world isn't just some fuzzy feeling. Nope. In the world of science, it's a number, a hard metric that can literally make or break the entire validity of a scientific study. So, how in the world does this idea translate from a childhood playroom to a high-tech lab? Well, for scientists, the challenge is proving that their tools are actually reliable. I mean, how do they know their measurements aren't just random noise? They do it by measuring something called internal consistency reliability. I know, it sounds super complicated, but the idea is actually pretty simple. Think of it like a recipe for a cake. A reliable recipe gives you the same delicious cake every single time. But if you follow the recipe and one day you get a cake and the next day you get soup, well, that recipe is unreliable. And in science, that makes your findings totally invalid. See, for researchers, a feeling of consistency just doesn't cut it. They have to prove it with cold, hard numbers. Turning this idea of trustworthiness into a number you can actually verify is the absolute cornerstone of rigorous science. And how they calculate that number turns out to be critical. This really highlights a key finding from a big study on teacher testing. If you just mash all the data together, what they call aggregate data, you can get a really misleading picture. But a multi-level approach is way smarter because it adds context. It separates how an individual person does from how their whole group, say their university, does. It's a small change, but believe me, it has a huge impact. And wow, the results were just striking. Without that context, the test's reliability looked pretty low. You might look at that and think, well, this test is flawed, maybe even useless. But, and this is the amazing part, when researchers analyzed it at the university level, the reliability was nearly perfect. The score just skyrocketed. This proved the test was actually fantastic for comparing universities, just not for comparing individual teachers. Context was everything. And get this failure to provide a clear, consistent signal isn't just a problem for scientists in a lab. It's the exact same thing that can undermine businesses every single day. The cost of sending mixed messages can be absolutely huge. All right, so let's shift gears and take this concept out of the lab and into the marketplace. Because in business, inconsistency isn't just a data problem, it's a serious financial one. Here's a classic scenario. You've probably seen this. The marketing team is all over LinkedIn talking about innovation and cutting-edge solutions. But then the sales team, in their pitches, is emphasizing reliability and proven methods. Now, both of those messages are positive, but they're not aligned. They're telling different stories, and the customer is left totally confused. So how does this fracture even happen? Well, it's like a domino effect. It usually starts with internal silos, where teams aren't talking to each other. That leads to these conflicting stories, which causes customer confusion. And the final result? Trust just erodes. The brand looks disorganized, and people start to lose faith in something they can't rely on. And we're not just talking about abstract issues here. These have real bottom-line consequences. Conversion rates drop, brand loyalty tanks, and you lose out on the massive long-term value of a loyal customer, all because the message wasn't consistent. This quote absolutely hits the nail on the head when it comes to the psychology here. Our brains are hardwired to look for patterns. So when we see inconsistency, like a brand with a split personality, it creates what's called cognitive dissonance. It's like a little mental red flag goes up, and that immediately triggers skepticism. And just like that, trust is lost. Okay, so we've been to the playroom, the research lab, and the boardroom. So what's the one big idea, the common thread here? Well, it turns out there's a universal law of trust that emerges from all of this. When you lay it all out like this, it becomes crystal clear. At the end of the day, in parenting, consistency builds emotional security. In science, it ensures your data is valid. And in branding, it builds customer trust and loyalty. It's the exact same principle at work, and the outcome is always the same. Consistency builds trust, and inconsistency completely destroys it. So, I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on. If consistency really is the foundation of all trust, take a moment to think about your own world, your work, your relationships, even your own habits. Where might a hidden lack of consistency be quietly undermining the very trust you're working so hard to build? The answer just might change everything.